The summer sun blazed over the stone walls of Windsor Castle as tourists from every corner of the world gathered outside the historic gates. Among them was Emma Chen, a 26-year-old travel blogger from California who had saved for 2 years to make this European adventure happen. She stood with her camera in hand, her eyes wide with excitement as she watched the famous Queen's Guard march past in their distinctive red tunics and towering bearskin hats. Emma had read about these soldiers before her trip. She knew they were real military personnel, not just actors in costumes. They served in the British Army's Household Division, tasked with protecting the royal residences. But like many tourists, she had also heard the stories and seen the viral videos. People would make silly faces at the guards, stand too close, or try to make them laugh. The guards, in turn, would remain perfectly still, their faces blank and expressionless. It had become something of a game for visitors, a challenge to see if anyone could break the stoic composure of these soldiers. What Emma didn't fully understand was the seriousness of their duty. These weren't performers at a theme park. They were trained soldiers carrying real weapons, and they took their responsibilities with absolute dedication. The famous stillness wasn't a trick or an act. It was discipline, duty, and respect for centuries of military tradition. Emma positioned herself near the gate, where one guard stood at attention. His eyes stared straight ahead, his jaw set firm beneath the massive furry hat. She snapped a few photos, laughing with a group of other tourists who were also trying to get the perfect shot. Someone suggested she stand next to him for a picture. Someone else dared her to touch the guard's arm to see what would happen. At first, Emma hesitated. Something in her gut told her this might not be a good idea. But the crowd around her was encouraging, and the excitement of the moment swept away her doubts. After all, what harm could it do? The guards never reacted anyway, right? That was their whole thing. She thought it would just be a funny moment to share on her blog, maybe get some likes on social media. She handed her camera to another tourist and stepped forward. The guard remained motionless, his eyes fixed on some distant point. Emma moved closer, her heart pounding with a mix of excitement and nervousness. She raised her hand, intending to just lightly tap his sleeve for the photo. But as she reached out, someone in the crowd behind her stumbled, bumping into her back. Emma lost her balance. Her hand, instead of gently tapping the guard's arm, slapped against his chest with much more force than she had intended. The sound echoed off the ancient stones around them. The crowd gasped collectively. Time seemed to freeze for a moment. Emma's face went pale as she realized what had just happened. This wasn't a light touch anymore. She had actually hit a Queen's Guard. Her mind raced with panic. What would happen now? Would she be arrested? Would they kick her out of the country? Stories of tourists being tackled by guards or shouted at flashed through her memory. The guard's eyes, which had been staring into the distance, suddenly snapped down to meet hers. For a split second, she saw something flash across his face. But it wasn't anger. It wasn't the cold, stern look she expected. There was something else there. Something she couldn't quite identify in that brief moment. Then, in a movement so sudden it made several tourists jump back, the guard did something unexpected. His hand moved to his rifle, and for a heart-stopping second, Emma thought the worst. But instead of raising it, he simply adjusted his grip and took one deliberate step forward. His boots made a sharp crack against the cobblestones. Emma stumbled backward, nearly falling as she tried to put distance between herself and the soldier. Her face burned with embarrassment and fear. The crowd around her had gone completely silent. Even the usually chatty tour guides had stopped talking. Everyone was watching, waiting to see what would happen next. The guard opened his mouth. When guard spoke, it was usually to shout a warning at tourists who got too close or behaved inappropriately. Emma braced herself for the angry words she was sure would come. Her hands trembled at her sides. She wanted to apologize, to explain it was an accident, but her voice seemed to have disappeared entirely. What came out of the guard's mouth, however, was not what anyone expected. Not Emma, not the crowd, not even the other guards who stood at nearby posts. The words that followed would change everything about how Emma saw not just the royal guards, but how she understood duty, humanity, and the unexpected kindness that can exist even in the most formal and rigid situations. The castle walls seemed to lean in closer, as if the ancient stones themselves wanted to hear what would happen next. Cameras were raised, ready to capture whatever moment was about to unfold. Emma stood frozen, her tourist adventure having taken a turn she never could have imagined when she woke up that morning in her London hotel room. The sun continued to beat down on the scene, and somewhere in the distance a clock tower began to chime. But in that courtyard, with hundreds of eyes watching, time seemed to have stopped completely. Emma Chen, a girl from California who just wanted some fun vacation photos, was about to learn a lesson about respect, responsibility, and the real people behind the uniforms that would stay with her for the rest of her life. The guard took a breath, and the entire crowd seemed to hold theirs in anticipation. The guard's voice, when it finally came, was not the harsh shout Emma had expected. It was firm, yes, and loud enough for the gathered crowd to hear, but there was something measured about it. Something almost careful. "Miss, you need to step back immediately," he said, his eyes still locked on hers. "This is a restricted area, and physical contact with the Queen's Guard is not permitted." Emma nodded frantically, her feet already moving her backward. I'm so sorry," she managed to stammer out, her voice cracking with emotion. "I didn't mean to, someone pushed me, I was just trying to—" But the guard had already returned to his position. His eyes went back to that 1,000-yard stare, looking at nothing and everything at once. His face became a mask once more, unreadable and still. It was as if the last 30 seconds had never happened. He stood there, a statue in red and black, while Emma remained a few feet away, unsure of what to do next. The crowd slowly began to murmur again. Some people looked disappointed, as if they had hoped for something more dramatic. Others seemed relieved that the situation hadn't escalated. A few tourists even laughed nervously, the tension breaking as they returned to their sightseeing. But Emma couldn't move. She felt rooted to the spot, shame and embarrassment washing over her in waves. An older security officer in a different uniform approached from the side of the courtyard. He was shorter than the guard, with gray hair and a weathered face that suggested he had been working at the castle for many years. He walked up to Emma with a professional but not unkind expression. "Miss, I'm going to have to ask you to come with me," he said quietly, his hand gesturing toward a small office building adjacent to the main tourist area. Emma's heart sank even further. This was it. She was going to be in real trouble now, maybe even banned from visiting other royal sites. She thought about her travel blog, about how she would have to write about getting kicked out of Windsor Castle. The humiliation felt overwhelming. She followed the officer through the crowd, aware of dozens of phones still pointed in her direction. She could already imagine the video titles: "Stupid Tourist Attacks Royal Guard," or "American Girl Gets What She Deserves at Windsor." Her cheeks burned as they walked. The officer led her into a small, plain office with just a desk, a few chairs, and some filing cabinets. There were photos on the walls showing different guards and ceremonies from over the years. He gestured for her to sit, and then he sat down across from her, pulling out a notepad. "Can you tell me what happened out there?" he asked, his pen ready. Emma explained everything, her words tumbling out in a rush. She told him about the dare, about losing her balance, about not meaning to actually hit the guard. She apologized repeatedly, her eyes filling with tears. She had never been in trouble like this before. She had never even gotten a speeding ticket. The officer listened patiently, nodding occasionally. When she finished, he set down his pen and looked at her for a long moment. Then, to her surprise, his stern expression softened just a little. "Listen, miss," he said, leaning back in his chair. "You're not the first tourist to do something foolish around the guards, and you won't be the last. The important thing is whether you understand why it was wrong." Emma nodded vigorously. I really do. I wasn't thinking. I know they're real soldiers, not just like decorations or performers. I feel terrible." The officer studied her face, seeming to assess her sincerity. Then he sighed. "Those men and women out there," he said, gesturing toward the window that overlooked the courtyard. "They're serving their country. They've been through rigorous training. They carry loaded weapons. They're not there for entertainment, even though many tourists seem to think they are." He pulled out a brochure from his desk drawer and slid it across to Emma. It showed information about the Queen's Guard, their history, and their role. "The guard you touched, his name is Private James Morrison. He's 23 years old. He served a tour in Afghanistan before being selected for ceremonial duties. When he's standing out there in that uniform, he's on duty, just as much as any soldier in a combat zone. Do you understand that?" Emma felt a fresh wave of shame. She had thought of the guard as a prop, something for her vacation photos. She hadn't considered him as a real person with a real job and real experiences. I understand, she whispered. I'm really, really sorry. The officer nodded. I believe you are. Now, typically, what you did could result in arrest for assault on a military service member. It could also get you banned from all royal properties in the UK. Emma felt her stomach drop. Please, she began, but the officer held up his hand. However, he continued, given that it appears to have been an accident and given your obvious remorse, I'm going to let you off with a warning this time. But I need you to understand the seriousness of what happened, and I need you to promise that you'll be more respectful in the future. Relief flooded through Emma. Yes, absolutely, I promise. Thank you so much. The officer stood, indicating the meeting was over. You can go, he said. But before you do, Private Morrison asked if he could have a word with you. His shift ends in about 10 minutes. If you're willing to wait, he'll meet you out front. Emma's eyes widened. He wants to talk to me. He does, the officer confirmed. You don't have to if you don't want to, but he specifically requested it. Emma's mind raced. Why would the guard want to talk to her? Was he angry? Did he want to yell at her properly now that he was off duty? Or was this some kind of additional official procedure? Despite her nervousness, curiosity won out. I'll wait, she said. The officer showed her to a small waiting area near the staff entrance. Emma sat on a wooden bench, her camera bag in her lap, her mind spinning with questions. She watched the clock on the wall tick slowly forward, each minute feeling like an hour. She thought about just leaving, walking away and forgetting this whole embarrassing incident. But something kept her in that seat. Finally, after what felt like forever, the door opened. The guard walked through, but he looked different now. He had removed the tall bearskin hat, and his red tunic was unbuttoned at the top. His face, which had been so rigid and emotionless before, now looked young and tired. He saw Emma and walked over, his military bearing still evident in his posture. Emma stood up quickly, words of apology already forming on her lips. But before she could speak, Private James Morrison did something that surprised her once again. He smiled. It was a small, somewhat weary smile, but it was genuine. Please sit down, Private Morrison said, gesturing to the bench. He took a seat beside her, maintaining a respectful distance. Up close, Emma could see the tiredness in his eyes, the slight redness on his forehead where the heavy bearskin hat had been pressing down for hours. He looked human now, not like the statue she had seen outside. I'm so sorry, Emma blurted out before he could say anything else. I know I already apologized, but I need you to know I didn't mean to hit you. Someone bumped me and I lost my balance, and it all happened so fast. I feel absolutely terrible about it. James nodded, his expression understanding. I know, he said simply. I could tell it was an accident. I've been doing this job for 8 months now, and I've learned to read situations pretty quickly. I could see the panic on your face the moment it happened. Emma felt some of the tension leave her shoulders, but confusion replaced it. Then why did you want to talk to me? James leaned back against the wall, looking thoughtful. Because I wanted you to understand something I wish more tourists knew. He paused, choosing his words carefully. When you're out there in that uniform standing guard, you become invisible as a person. People see the costume, the tradition, the spectacle. They don't see you. Emma listened intently, struck by the sadness in his voice. I stand out there for hours at a time, James continued, in the heat of summer, in the rain, in the bitter cold of winter. My feet hurt, my back aches, and sometimes that hat feels like it weighs 100 pounds. But I do it because it's an honor. It's part of serving my country. And most days that's enough. He turned to look at Emma directly. But then tourists come and they poke at us, they mock us, they try to make us flinch or laugh or break our concentration. They touch us without permission, stand on our feet, wave things in our faces, and we're expected to just take it, to remain professional no matter what. Emma felt shame creeping back over her. I'm one of those tourists, she said quietly. I'm exactly what you're talking about. You were, James corrected gently. Past tense, but you're here now listening, and that matters. He pulled out his phone and showed her a video. It was from earlier that day before Emma had arrived. It showed a man deliberately stepping on a guard's foot, then laughing as the guard stood there unable to react. The crowd around him laughed too, finding it entertaining. That guard is my friend Tom, James said. That tourist broke 2 of his toes. Tom finished his shift anyway, standing for another hour in agony because that's what we do. The tourist was arrested afterward, but the damage was done. Emma's hand went to her mouth in shock. That's horrible. It happens more often than you'd think, James said, putting his phone away. Last month, a woman kissed a guard without his consent while her boyfriend filmed it. The video went viral and everyone thought it was funny. But that guard felt violated. He couldn't move, couldn't defend himself, couldn't say no. He had to just stand there while she did whatever she wanted. Emma's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they were tears of understanding rather than self-pity. I never thought about it that way, she admitted. I just saw the videos online and thought it was all part of the experience. Like you were used to it. Being used to something doesn't make it right, James said. And just because we can't react doesn't mean we don't feel it. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of his words hanging in the air between them. Emma thought about all the videos she had watched before her trip, all the ones she had laughed at, shared, or liked. She had never considered the person inside the uniform, never thought about how it might feel to be treated like a prop rather than a human being. Why are you telling me all this? Emma asked finally. You could have just let the officer handle it and never thought about me again. James smiled again, that same tired but genuine smile. Because you seem like someone who actually cares. When you realized what you'd done, you didn't laugh it off or make excuses. You looked genuinely horrified. And I thought, maybe if I explain things to you, you'll understand. And maybe you'll help others understand too. I will, Emma promised. I have a travel blog. Not a huge one, but I have a few thousand followers. I can write about this, about what you've told me. That would be good, James said. But more than that, just treat people with respect. All people, everywhere you go. That guard at Buckingham Palace, that server at the restaurant, that street performer in the square, they're all human beings doing their jobs. They all deserve dignity. Emma nodded, committing his words to memory. Can I ask you something? Sure. When I hit you, I saw something in your eyes just for a second. Before you stepped forward and spoke. What was it? James thought about this for a moment. Honestly, it was recognition. I saw my sister in you. Emma looked confused. Your sister? She's around your age, James explained. She travels a lot, posts on social media, loves taking pictures, and I thought, if she were in a foreign country and made a mistake like that, I'd want someone to be kind to her. I'd want someone to help her understand rather than just punish her. Emma felt a lump form in her throat. Your sister is lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have her, James replied. She keeps me grounded, reminds me why I'm doing this job. I'm not just protecting buildings or traditions. I'm protecting people, their freedom to travel, to explore, to live without fear. He stood up and Emma did the same. I should get going, he said. Long shift today and I have training tomorrow morning. Thank you, Emma said, extending her hand. Thank you for taking the time to talk to me, for helping me understand. I won't forget this. James shook her hand firmly. Just pay it forward. Be kind, be respectful, and help others do the same. As he turned to leave, Emma called out, James? He turned back. For what it's worth, thank you for your service, really. I know that might sound cliché, but I mean it. What you do out there, standing guard, protecting people, it matters. You matter. Something shifted in James's expression. For a moment, Emma saw past the soldier, past the professional, and glimpsed the young man underneath. Thank you, he said softly. You don't know how much that means to hear. He walked away, disappearing through a doorway that led deeper into the castle complex. Emma stood there for a long moment, processing everything that had happened. She thought about the person she had been that morning, eager for funny tourist photos and viral moments. She thought about who she wanted to be going forward. She pulled out her phone and looked at the photos she had taken throughout the day. There were dozens of them, selfies and shots of the guards, all taken without thinking about the real people behind the uniforms. She deleted them, every single one. Emma walked slowly back to her hotel through the streets of Windsor, her mind replaying the conversation with James over and over. The evening air was cool, and the ancient town was beautiful in the golden light of sunset, but she barely noticed. She was too busy thinking about the lessons she had learned, about the humanity behind the uniforms, about respect and dignity and seeing people as people. When she reached her small hotel room, she sat on the bed and opened her laptop. Her travel blog, Emma's Adventures, stared back at her from the screen. She scrolled through her recent posts, seeing them now with new eyes. There were silly photos from Paris, goofy selfies at the Eiffel Tower, pictures of her making faces at street performers in Barcelona. They all seemed shallow now. focused on her own entertainment rather than genuine appreciation for the places and people she encountered. She began to write. The words poured out of her, raw and honest. She wrote about what had happened at Windsor Castle, about her mistake, about the conversation with Private James Morrison. She didn't paint herself as a hero or a victim. She wrote about her ignorance, her thoughtlessness, and what she had learned. She wrote about the man behind the uniform, about the guards who stood for hours in pain, about the tourists who treated them like props. The post was longer than anything she had written before. Usually she kept things light and breezy, focused on pretty pictures and quick tips. But this felt different. This felt important. She titled it, "The Day I Learned to See the Person in the Uniform," and hit publish before she could second-guess herself. Then she went to bed, exhausted emotionally and physically from the day's events. She didn't expect much response to the post. Her blog had a modest following, mostly friends and family and a few fellow travel enthusiasts. She thought maybe a few people would read it, maybe a few would comment, then life would go on. She woke up the next morning to her phone buzzing continuously. Confused and still half asleep, she grabbed it from the nightstand. Her email inbox was flooded with notifications, comments on her blog, shares on social media, messages from people she didn't know. Her post had gone viral overnight. Emma sat up quickly, her heart pounding. She opened her blog dashboard and stared in disbelief at the numbers. Thousands of views, hundreds of comments. The post had been shared across multiple social media platforms, picked up by several travel forums, and was trending on tourism discussion pages. She began reading the comments, her eyes scanning faster and faster. Many people thanked her for sharing her story. They admitted they had done similar things, treating guards and other workers in foreign countries as entertainment rather than people. Some shared their own stories of learning similar lessons. Travel bloggers with larger followings were sharing her post, adding their own reflections on respectful tourism. But not all the comments were positive. Some people accused her of being too sensitive, saying the guards signed up for the job and should expect tourists to interact with them. Others said she was ruining the fun of traveling, making everything too serious. A few were outright cruel, calling her names and mocking her for apologizing. Emma read through both the supportive and critical comments, taking them all in. She understood now that putting herself out there meant opening herself up to all kinds of responses, but she also realized that the message was more important than her comfort. Her phone rang. It was a number she didn't recognize, a London area code. Hesitantly, she answered. "Hello, is this Emma Chen?" A professional-sounding woman's voice asked. "Yes, this is Emma. My name is Sarah Williams, and I'm a producer for a morning talk show here in London. We've seen your blog post about the incident at Windsor Castle, and we'd love to have you on the show to talk about it. Would you be interested?" Emma's mind raced. A television interview? I don't know. I'm not really trying to make this about me. I just wanted people to understand. That's exactly why we want you on, Sarah interrupted gently. The conversation you're starting about respectful tourism is important. We have a segment on our show about travel etiquette, and your story fits perfectly. You'd be helping to spread the message further. Emma thought about James, about what he had said about paying it forward. "Okay," she said. "I'll do it." The interview was scheduled for 2 days later, which gave Emma time to prepare and to continue her travels. But everything felt different now. She visited the British Museum and found herself noticing the security guards, thanking them, seeing them as individuals rather than invisible fixtures. She ate at a small restaurant and had a real conversation with her server, asking about her day and leaving a generous tip. She watched street performers and waited until they finished their acts to take photos, always asking permission first. She documented these interactions in follow-up blog posts, each one emphasizing respect, awareness, and human connection. Her following grew rapidly. She was becoming known not just for her travel content, but for her advocacy for respectful tourism. The morning of the interview, Emma took the train into central London. She was nervous, her hands shaking slightly as she walked into the television studio. She had never been on TV before. What if she said something wrong? What if people misunderstood her message? Sarah met her in the green room, the area where guests waited before going on air. "Don't worry," she said, seeing Emma's nervous expression. "Just be yourself. Tell your story honestly, just like you did in your blog post." As they chatted, Sarah mentioned something that made Emma's heart skip. We actually have a surprise guest joining us for the segment. We thought it would add an important perspective to the conversation. Who? Emma asked. Sarah smiled mysteriously. You'll see. Emma was led onto the set, a bright, modern space with comfortable chairs arranged in a conversational semicircle. The hosts, a friendly-looking man and woman, greeted her warmly and helped her get settled. The lights were hot and bright, and Emma could see cameras positioned around the set, their red lights indicating they were recording. The male host, David, began the segment. Our next guest has started an important conversation about how we treat people when we travel. Emma Chen is a travel blogger who recently had an eye-opening experience at Windsor Castle. Emma, welcome to the show. Thank you for having me, Emma said, trying to keep her voice steady. The female host, Claire, jumped in. Emma, can you tell us what happened that day at Windsor Castle? Emma told the story just as she had written it in her blog. She didn't leave out any details, including her own foolishness and the shame she felt. The host listened intently, nodding along. What was it about your conversation with the guard that changed your perspective so dramatically? David asked. It was realizing that I had stopped seeing him as a person, Emma explained. I saw a uniform, a tradition, a photo opportunity. But behind that uniform was James, a real person with feelings, with a family, with a story. He had served in Afghanistan. He stood in pain for hours, and tourists like me were treating him like he didn't matter. Claire leaned forward. You mentioned in your blog that he reminded you that we need to treat all workers with respect, not just guards. Can you expand on that? Emma nodded. Absolutely. It's not just about royal guards. It's about everyone we encounter when we travel. The hotel staff, the tour guides, the restaurant workers, the street cleaners. They're all people deserving of basic human dignity and respect. Sometimes when we're on vacation, we forget that. We treat people like they're part of the scenery. Well, David said, a smile playing at his lips. We thought this conversation deserved another voice. Emma, we have a special guest who wanted to join us today. Emma's breath caught as a door at the side of the set opened. Private James Morrison walked through, dressed in his military dress uniform rather than the ceremonial red tunic. He looked composed and professional, but when his eyes met Emma's, he gave her that same small, genuine smile. Emma's eyes filled with tears. She hadn't expected this, hadn't dared to hope she might see him again. James took the seat next to her as the hosts welcomed him. Private Morrison, thank you so much for joining us, Claire said warmly. We understand you're the guard from Emma's story. That's correct, James replied, his military training evident in his posture and clear speech. And I want to say first of all how impressed I am with what Emma has done since that day. Taking responsibility for a mistake and turning it into something positive takes real courage. Emma wiped at her eyes, overwhelmed by the kindness in his words. David turned to James. Can you tell us what it's really like standing guard at these royal residences? What do tourists not understand? James took a moment to consider his answer. I think the biggest misconception is that we're not really soldiers. People see the ceremonial uniform and think we're actors or models, just there for decoration. But every guard you see is a fully trained soldier from the British Army. Many of us have served in combat zones. We carry loaded rifles and we're prepared to use them if necessary to protect the royal family and the public. So when tourists try to make you laugh or touch you, what's going through your mind? Claire asked. It depends on the situation, James admitted. Sometimes it's just annoying, like having someone poke at you when you're trying to work. But sometimes it crosses a line into actual interference with our duties. We need to maintain awareness of our surroundings at all times. We're watching for genuine threats. When tourists are creating distractions, grabbing at us, or blocking our view, they're actually making it harder for us to do our job of keeping people safe. Emma listened, learning things James hadn't mentioned in their private conversation. She was grateful for this opportunity to hear more of his perspective. Emma, David said, turning back to her, your blog post has sparked a huge conversation online. What kind of responses have you been getting? It's been mixed, Emma said honestly. A lot of people have reached out to say they never thought about it this way before, and they're going to be more mindful when they travel. But others think I'm overreacting, that these interactions are harmless fun and I'm ruining the tourist experience. What would you say to those people? Claire asked. Emma glanced at James, then back at the hosts. I'd say that fun doesn't have to come at someone else's expense. You can still have an amazing, joyful travel experience while treating people with respect. In fact, I think treating people with kindness makes travel more meaningful, not less. James nodded in agreement. I'd add that we're not asking tourists to ignore us or not take photos. We understand we're part of the attraction at these historic sites. We just ask that people maintain a respectful distance, don't touch us without permission, and remember that we're real people doing a real job. The conversation continued for several more minutes, covering everything from social media's impact on tourist behavior to practical tips for traveling respectfully. The hosts were skilled at keeping the discussion balanced and informative without being preachy. As the segment wrapped up, Claire asked one final question. Emma, what's next for you? Are you continuing your travels? I am, Emma confirmed. But I'm approaching it differently now. I want to focus on meaningful cultural experiences, supporting local communities and sharing stories about the people I meet, not just the places I visit. I want my blog to inspire people to travel with curiosity and respect. And Private Morrison, David added, is there anything else you'd like people to know? James looked directly into the camera. Just that behind every uniform, every name tag, every job title, there's a person with hopes, dreams, struggles, and feelings. Whether you're at Windsor Castle or your local grocery store, a little kindness goes a long way. We all have hard days. A simple thank you or a moment of genuine respect can make a real difference. The interview ended, and as the camera lights dimmed, Emma turned to James. I can't believe you came. When did they contact you? A few days ago, James said. They explained what they were planning, and I thought it was a good opportunity to get the message out there. Plus, I wanted to see how you were doing. I've been thinking about our conversation every day, Emma admitted. It really changed how I see the world. That's the best outcome I could have hoped for, James said. And now with your blog and this interview, maybe it will change how other people see the world too. They exchanged contact information, promising to keep in touch. Sarah, the producer, approached them with a smile. That was fantastic, she said. Really powerful television. We've already gotten responses from viewers saying they were moved by the conversation. Over the next few weeks, the impact of the interview became clear. The video clip was shared widely online, racking up millions of views. News outlets picked up the story. Other travel bloggers started sharing their own experiences and reflections on respectful tourism. Tourism boards and travel companies began incorporating discussions about respectful behavior into their promotional materials. Emma's blog grew exponentially. She was invited to speak at travel conferences, to write guest posts for major travel publications, and to consult with tourism organizations about ethical travel practices. But she never lost sight of the lesson James had taught her. With every post, every speech, every interview, she emphasized the human element of travel. She continued her European adventure, but it was transformed. In Amsterdam, she took a canal tour and spent time talking with the boat captain about his life on the water, sharing his story on her blog with his permission. In Rome, she joined a local family for dinner, arranged through a cultural exchange program, and learned about daily life in the city beyond the tourist attractions. In Barcelona, she volunteered with a beach cleanup organization, giving back to a place that had given her so much beauty to enjoy. Each experience was documented not just with pretty photos, but with stories about the people she met, the connections she made, and the lessons she learned. Her followers appreciated this deeper approach to travel content. Her comment sections became spaces for meaningful discussions about cultural sensitivity, ethical tourism, and how to be a good global citizen. James, too, found that the interview had an impact on his life. He received messages from other guards thanking him for speaking out, saying they felt seen and heard in a way they never had before. The Ministry of Defense noted the positive attention, and James was asked to participate in a training program for new guards, helping them understand the public-facing aspects of their role and how to handle difficult situations with tourists. 6 months after the incident at Windsor Castle, Emma returned to London. She had been invited to give a keynote speech at a major travel conference, but before the event, she made a special trip to Windsor. She stood outside the castle gates, watching the changing of the guard ceremony with new eyes. This time she didn't pull out her camera to get selfies. She didn't try to get close to the guards or make them react. She simply watched, appreciating the precision of their movements, the weight of tradition they carried, and the dedication it took to perform this duty day after day. After the ceremony, she walked to a small cafe nearby where she had arranged to meet James. He was already there, out of uniform, looking relaxed in jeans and a sweater. They hugged like old friends, which, in a way, they had become. "I saw your latest blog post," James said as they sat down with their coffee. "The one about sustainable tourism in Iceland. Really well done." "Thanks," Emma said. "I'm trying to use the platform I've built to actually make a difference, you know? Not just entertain people, but educate them." "You're doing more than that," James said. "You're changing how people think about travel, about respect, about seeing others as human beings. That ripples out in ways you might never even know." They talked for over an hour, catching up on their lives. James told her about his plans to eventually leave the ceremonial duties and work in military training. Emma shared her dreams of writing a book about meaningful travel experiences. They discussed the ongoing conversation about tourist behavior and how it seemed to be slowly shifting. As Emma and James continued their conversation in the cafe, a woman approached their table hesitantly. She was in her early 30s, holding a phone in her hand, and looked nervous. "Excuse me," she said, her accent marking her as American. "Are you Emma Chen, the travel blogger?" Emma nodded, a bit surprised to be recognized in person. "Yes, I am." The woman's face lit up. "I thought so. I follow your blog religiously. I'm actually in London because of you, in a way. I read your posts about traveling respectfully, and it inspired me to plan my first international trip. I wanted to do it right, you know?" Emma felt a warmth spread through her chest. "That's wonderful. Are you enjoying your visit?" "I am," the woman said. "And I just came from Windsor Castle. I watched the changing of the guard, and instead of trying to get selfies or make them laugh like I might have done before, I just watched and appreciated it. It felt more special that way, more real." James spoke up. "That means a lot to hear, truly." The woman looked at him, then back at Emma, confusion crossing her face. Emma smiled. "This is Private James Morrison. He's one of the guards from Windsor Castle." The woman's eyes widened. "Oh my goodness, you're the guard from the story." The one who talked to Emma. She looked starstruck but maintained a respectful distance. "Thank you for what you do. After reading Emma's blog and watching your interview, I have so much respect for your service." "Thank you," James said sincerely. "And thank you for being the kind of tourist who takes the time to understand and respect the places you visit." The woman thanked them both again and left, practically glowing with excitement. Emma and James exchanged a look, both thinking the same thing. This was exactly what they had hoped would happen. The message was spreading person by person, traveler by traveler. The next day, Emma gave her keynote speech at the travel conference. The room was packed with travel industry professionals, bloggers, tour operators, and tourism officials. She stood at the podium, looking out at the sea of faces, and felt a moment of nervousness. Then she remembered James's words about courage and took a deep breath. She told her story from the beginning, holding nothing back. She talked about her ignorance, her mistake, and the profound lesson she learned. She showed the video clip from her television interview with James. Then she challenged everyone in the room to think differently about their role in tourism. "We have the power to shape how people travel," she said, her voice strong and clear. "Whether you're a blogger like me, a tour operator, a hotel manager, or a tourism official, you influence how tourists behave in your destination. We need to use that power responsibly." She outlined practical steps: education before travel, clear guidelines about respectful behavior, consequences for those who harm local communities or disrespect cultural sites, and celebration of tourists who get it right. She talked about sustainable tourism, not just in environmental terms, but in human terms too. Every person working in tourism, from the palace guard to the hotel housekeeper to the street food vendor, deserves to be treated with dignity, she continued. They're not props for our vacation photos. They're not entertainment. They're people, and they matter. The speech received a standing ovation. Afterward, Emma was surrounded by people wanting to talk, to share their own stories. to discuss how they could implement these principles in their own work. Several major tour companies approached her about consulting on their training programs. A travel magazine offered her a regular column, but the moment that meant the most came later that evening. Emma received an email from a teacher in Australia. She had shown Emma's blog posts and the interview with James to her high school geography class. The students had been so moved that they started a project called Travel with Heart, creating educational materials about respectful tourism to share with other schools. They wanted Emma's permission to use her story. Emma immediately wrote back, giving her blessing and offering to video call with the class. As she hit send, she thought about the chain of impact that had started with one mistake, one conversation, one willingness to learn and change. Over the following year, Emma's influence continued to grow. She partnered with James to create a video series called Behind the Uniform, featuring interviews with workers from tourist sites around the world. Palace guards, tour guides, museum staff, national park rangers, all sharing their experiences and perspectives. The series was picked up by a major streaming service and became required viewing for many tourism studies programs. Emma also started a nonprofit organization called Mindful Travel Initiative. It provided resources for travelers, worked with tourism boards to develop ethical tourism standards, and offered grants to local communities impacted by tourism to help them preserve their culture and way of life while benefiting economically from visitors. James eventually transitioned out of ceremonial duties and became an instructor at the military academy, but he remained involved with Emma's initiatives, speaking at events and helping to train tourism staff in how to handle difficult situations with visitors while maintaining their dignity and safety. 2 years after the incident at Windsor Castle, Emma was invited back to give a talk to the Queen's Guard. She stood in front of a group of young soldiers who were about to begin their ceremonial duties, many of them nervous about the public-facing aspect of the role. "You're going to have hard days," she told them honestly. "You're going to encounter tourists who don't understand, who don't respect you, who see you as entertainment rather than soldiers. It's going to be frustrating and sometimes even hurtful." She paused, looking at their young faces. "But I want you to know that there are millions of people around the world who do see you, who do respect you, and who are learning to travel better because of the conversation that's been started. You're not invisible. You're not unimportant. You matter." She told them her story, showing them what could happen when a moment of disrespect becomes a moment of connection and learning. "Every interaction is an opportunity," she said. "An opportunity to maintain your dignity, to represent your service with honor, and maybe, just maybe, to change someone's perspective." After the talk, several young guards came up to thank her. One, a young woman who looked barely out of her teens, had tears in her eyes. "My older brother served in ceremonial duties," she said. "He had a really hard time with how tourists treated him. He felt like people didn't see him as a real soldier. I wish someone like you had been around back then to help people understand." Emma hugged her. "Then do me a favor. When you're out there standing guard, remember that you're not just protecting the castle. You're representing something important: duty, service, dedication. And some tourist somewhere is going to see that and be moved by it. They're going to learn something about respect and honor, even if they don't realize it at the time." Emma's blog continued to thrive, but it had evolved into something much bigger than a simple travel diary. It became a community of mindful travelers, a resource for ethical tourism, and a platform for the voices of people who worked in the tourism industry. Emma used her influence to highlight local businesses, indigenous communities, and sustainable travel initiatives. She never forgot the lesson James taught her that day outside Windsor Castle. Every blog post, every speech, every video ended with a simple reminder: travel with your eyes open, your heart engaged, and your respect intact. The world is full of beautiful places, but it's the people you meet along the way who will truly transform your journey. James and Emma remained friends, their unlikely connection born from a moment of crisis becoming a lasting bond. They would meet up whenever Emma was in London, sharing stories about the impact they were seeing, the changes they were witnessing, and how people approached travel and tourism. 5 years after the incident, Emma published her book, The Person Behind the Uniform: Lessons in Mindful Travel. It became a bestseller, taught in universities and translated into multiple languages. The dedication page read simply, "For James, who taught me to see." On the day of her book launch in London, Emma stood in a bookshop surrounded by readers, journalists, and travel industry professionals. James stood at the back of the room in his dress uniform, having come straight from a military ceremony to support her. When Emma spotted him, she called him forward. None of this would exist without this man, she told the crowd. 5 years ago, he could have just let me walk away, embarrassed and disciplined but unchanged. Instead, he took the time to help me understand, to open my eyes to see the humanity in every interaction. That's the gift he gave me, and through this book I hope to pass that gift on to all of you. The crowd applauded as James joined her at the front. He spoke briefly, his words simple but powerful. Travel is a privilege. The ability to see the world, to experience different cultures, to step outside your everyday life. That's something special. All we ask is that you honor that privilege by treating the people you encounter with the same respect and kindness you'd want for yourself. That evening, after the event ended and the crowd dispersed, Emma and James walked along the Thames, watching the lights reflect on the water. It was quiet, peaceful, a moment of calm after years of whirlwind activity. Do you ever think about how different things would be if that day had gone differently? Emma asked. If I had just